Good day. This is the CFP Board-Registered Programs Winter 2014 update. I'm Dr. Charles Chaffin, Director of Academic Programs and Initiatives at CFP Board. Welcome to today's webinar. Glad that you joined us. A recording of this webinar will be available in the coming days. It'll be available on our webpage at cfp.net/registered programs, and I encourage you to share this with fellow colleagues and other faculty members within your program. So there's a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about essentially 7 points. I'm going to share some data for the first time regarding our registered programs and what we saw through the 2013 renewals, and then get into some overall data regarding our programs beyond renewals, and then talk a lot about a couple of things that are trends within, or I would say issues within the renewal documents, as well as some issues related to the exam and some policy notions ahead. So let's go ahead and get started. Just to give you an update right now as far as our total numbers of programs, we have 357, and you see the breakdown there in front of you. By far the largest growing portion of that is the baccalaureate programs. We are up 33% in baccalaureate programs within the past 3.5 years to be now at 120. So let's talk about the self-assessment for a bit. Obviously 2013, 2014 is the first biennial renewal, and through that process there is, as you are all aware, a significant self-assessment component of that. That is pretty consistent with a lot of other oversight bodies within higher education, and it really provides the opportunity for the institution and the program to go ahead and evaluate strengths and weaknesses, bring all stakeholders together and talk about ways for improvement, as well as opportunities for CFP Board to evaluate some of the successes and challenges of our programs. So just to get into some of this data, so looking at the question that talks about areas of strength, as you can see, with a total of 255 responses to break down, at least the top 10 categories are here in front of you. Faculty strength was a significant part. 30% of our degree programs suggested that was an area of strength. And you can see the breakdown there. The numbers go way down when we start talking about placement or involvement in professional groups, or accreditation for degree programs mainly had to do with organizations like AACSB or AAFCS or ACBSP, the Family Consumer Sciences, and the two business school accrediting bodies. Networking, student quality, you can see all that in front of you. Curriculum was relatively low, and I'll talk about identify some areas where institutions said that was actually a weakness. Interaction with practitioners was second, and so on. So areas of strength was really kind of varied out when you get beyond faculty. Professional engagement is really quite low if you think about you're looking at strengths within the degree programs. And this is just a list of how many times some of these lesser areas, these areas were mentioned. I should say not lesser areas, but they were mentioned quite significantly less than the first category. Guest lecturers and having an advisory board. So we only had three degree programs that said they had an advisory board or the program was represented within a college or school advisory board. So that's significantly low. And you think about many of these institutions where we get to weaknesses are saying, we really want to promote the program more, but yet they're not doing these things to engage practice. And so, we're going to talk about kind of connecting those dots here in just a second. Diversity only came up one time within all of these programs. Marketing. So essentially, I think there's some issues that we need to talk about with regard to how to go about this process, and I'll get to that in just a second. But there really, some of those strengths with regard to engaging practice and tracking and those types of things really didn't come up as much as we had hoped. And I know some of that is this is a new process for our programs, but I think there are great opportunities for growth as we go forward. For the certificate programs, faculty strength came up 22% of the time. We had a total of 265 responses, by the way, in 2013 relative to certificate programs. And then, a huge decline when it talks to relationship or interaction. 12% of the responses were interaction with practitioners, rather. Student guidance, the curriculum was considered a strength 8% of the time. Ongoing assessment. So some of these other areas were just a little bit smaller. Student support of the program, which essentially, the institution's talking about student groups, so they're talking about mentorship programs or those types of things. And here are some of the other ones that came up fewer times. Uses of a case or in all aspects of the program, where they were using a case that started at the beginning of the program of study, and they actually used that case throughout each of the courses, estate planning, investments, et cetera, so that students could get different perspectives relative to that. I think that's a really great way for students to really synthesize some of those areas. You can kind of look through this. This will be available as we go forward. I'm going to continue this looking at areas of weakness for degree programs. So enrollment comes up in 21% with 158 responses. 21% of our degree programs said that enrollment was an issue. And you go back to the strength side and look at those categories, and you see that practice engagement really not happening, or you don't see as many programs say, we're offering degree programs. We're not offering a general education course in financial literacy, financial planning at the 100 and 200 level to kind of act as that pipeline. And that 33% growth that we've seen in the degree programs, a lot of the newer ones have gone ahead and said when they went through the campus approval process to develop the program, they had that financial literacy class or that 100 or 200 level class as part of the proposal, which is certainly going to help enrollment, and having the right people teach that and making sure that students are aware of this financial planning as an option and something that they may look at taking on going forward. See, retention as a weakness, and a lot of this gets into tracking, as you see in the next category. Those two are very much related. So how are degree programs tracking their students going through the program? And I know that's a challenge for many of you that have a degree program that's a concentration or a specialization, and even in some institutions is a minor. But how can your institution do a better job of tracking students as they begin the program of study towards the end? Placement rates, seen as a weakness, that was few and far between. A lot of institutions talk positively, obviously, about placement rate, but 4% here said it was an issue. Experiential learning as 3%, availability, and length of the program seen as a weakness. And in that regard, length of the program, the institution decides what classes they want to register as part of the program. Now, we have 78 topics, and that's obviously a requirement. But how those are packaged to meet that contact hour requirement of 270 is certainly up to the institution. Program awareness, I think that goes back to some of the things you can do on campus. And with each one of these items, if you did your 2013 renewal and you got your letter from me back, you're seeing when these things are identified in your letter, I'm essentially talking to you and your colleagues and your administration and saying, here's some ways to fix that. Here's some things to think about. And I make myself really available to talk with administration and faculty about ways to correct these notions going forward. Here's the other areas of weakness, just to be completely transparent, that came up in the evaluations of the self-assessment of the degree programs. Self-assessment for certificate programs, so obviously enrollment they see as an issue. Retention is certainly a focus that we have specifically actually on the certificate side, but with all of our programs here in 2014. Low matriculation for exam, we're going to talk about that here later on, and you can read some of those other things. Tracking the students, certainly student engagement. Placement's not going to come up as much given the student profile as much as it would probably on the degree side, and then marketing and completion and retention certainly are related. And here's some of these other categories which you can kind of look at later on. one of the notions that I see here is some of these, and two of the institutions on the certificate side said lack of consistency within the curriculum. And there were a lot of other institutions that were part of the 2013 renewal that I kind of saw that lack of consistency, with syllabi that had, in one course they had really great structured learning objectives, and they adopted some of the ones that are in our document, and then they go to the next class and there are no learning objectives. There's no specificity with regard to the syllabus, and it's an issue there. And I know there's challenges with all program types, but particularly certificate programs when you get into part-time faculty and how you try to work with those folks to have some consistency with regard to the syllabus and certainly assessment and course structure. But that's certainly a trend with some of our certificate programs. Getting into identification method, so this is probably the biggest issue when it comes to the self-assessment, is essentially looking at who's sitting at the table to do these self-assessments, to identify the strengths and weaknesses. And so 22% did an internal program evaluation. Student evaluations were 16%. Our total here is 304 across all programs. Curricular enhancements are looking at adding a class, which both of those are plans for improvement, as I just kind of collapse these. Working with alumni, focus groups, and advisory groups. And, so the issue here with this one is when institutions send a self-assessment and they identify strengths and weaknesses, and then we get to the who's identified those, and the institution says, well, our students have. Well, students can be a great source of information with regard to course evaluations, but if you're using students to assess your program, I think it's going to come up a little bit short. How you go about having a systematic process of engaging your faculty, it would be great to have regular meetings, but certainly, via email or whatever, or a conference call if you've got a lot of adjuncts and it's tough to get everybody together, but to talk about assessing the program. Are you using the Capstone course as an opportunity to assess holes in your curriculum? Whether you have a formal or informal advisory group, I don't think matters, but as long as you're regularly engaging those folks or engaging employers, those are absolutely valid and important ways to assess your program. But programs were denied re-registration if they just said our students evaluate the program and they think it's great, so we have a lot of strengths. That's really not a very systematic way of evaluating the program. Student-centered learning objectives, overwhelming majority of our programs are saying that, and part of the reason why that's the case is because your institutions are asking for it, because the accreditors are asking for it. I mean, this is not this isn't anything that we just dreamed up here. I mean, this is part of higher education, and this is going to be a bigger part of our requirements going forward. And the majority of our institutions are already doing that. 10% said no, and we've had some follow-up regarding all of those. Varies depending upon the teacher. Again, that gets back to that whole notion of consistency across the program. So with this, and many of you have seen this before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. So of that majority of institutions and programs that are using learning objectives, some of them are doing a really good job of making those as part of the course. And what I mean by that is that they're actually using learning experiences that support those objectives, and then they're actually assessing for those learning objectives. So the learning objectives really don't mean anything. If you say the student should be able to do A, B, and C, well, you've got to facilitate some learning process so that they can do A, B, and C, and then you got to figure out whether or not they've done it, which is an assessment category. And then we close the loop, and it goes back to our learning objectives, and that's continuing. So what I'm seeing at the 30,000-foot level with all of our programs is the learning objectives are on the syllabi. I see them, and they're pretty, and you've got them there, but then in a lot of cases, they're not going anywhere. There isn't those other two components that really close the loop. And this is going to be a continued focus for, I'm sure, your institution, but certainly for CFP Board, that those learning objectives, that we're closing the loop on those, and we're assessing. I've probably had 30 or 40 conference calls in 2013 talking about this very topic and helping institutions and programs put together a plan to better close the loop with regard to these learning objectives. And I'm happy to continue to do that. Promotion of CFP Board accounts. So this is essentially making sure your students are registering for a free account, student CFP Board ID. This is something we're working to engage your students to help them through the program and to continue on to become CFP professionals. And we are going to continue to monitor that and continue to encourage our institutions to encourage their students to get an account. And some make it mandatory, but certainly a lot encouraged it. We certainly are noting ones that don't promote it, as we see that portion of the partnership to be very, very important. And then just to sum up, there's some additional strengths that were added that were beyond those that institutions may wanted to mention, talking about alumni support or some other external support or support from the administration in some way. And in a lot of cases, that what university support meant, it really should say college university support. What that was in a lot of cases that the institution might be providing a quarter-time appointment for the program director to actually lead the program. I think that's the next step for a lot of our programs. A lot of you don't have the time to, do those things that we just talked about, right? To engage practice, to connect with alumni, and all those other things. And so, maybe that's where practice could come in funding, but giving some of the people that are directing these programs the time to really do those things that are absolutely vital and important to the sustainability of the program. So, talking about this notion of evaluating the program, there's a distinction between program evaluation versus student assessment, and this came up several dozen times at our first time around with these reflections. So program evaluation is the evaluation of the efficacy of the program relative to the objectives. So whatever you said the objectives were, your curriculum instruction, which certainly gets into the learning objectives, but also the resources that you're using, the instructors that you're using, the delivery method, and then gets into other things like student placement, or where are your students going beyond that point? And this is obviously part of the reflective process. So, and then the letter you received will serve as the basis for the next evaluation. So if you say all of these things are weaknesses and you identify them, I'm not going to say, well, the program's not going to be renewed because you have a weakness in engaging practice. Now, if you say your weakness is that you only have 100 contact hours, that's a different story because that's certainly part of our requirements. But if you identify these weaknesses in a systematic way, I'm going to send a letter back saying, here's some things to think about. And then I'm going to say, you know what, I'm happy to talk with you about those things to think about, and let's put a plan together to try to make it better. Well, that letter is going to come back to you in 2015 saying, here was your letter in 2013, or if you're renewing in 2014, it'll be your letter that will come in 2016 saying, where are we at with these things? And for the most part, to me, that's not just, necessarily holding the program director accountable, but that's an advocacy instrument for you and your dean or your administrator, whoever that is, to say, here are the things that we've outlined, now what? What are we going to do? So I see this as an opportunity, especially for some of our adjunct program directors, to have a voice with administration and to track growth. We're not setting up benchmarks saying, 10% of a program director's time should be engaging practice or something ridiculous like that. But what we're saying is, here's what you're saying the weaknesses are. Let's put together a plan and let's see if we can move the needle together to try to get better. And again, I make myself very available to all the programs to schedule a time and really talk about some of these notions. And you feel free to email Pablo and get a time scheduled so we can talk about those things. So, okay, so back to this distinction between program evaluation and student assessment. Student assessment is quantifying student achievement relative to specific outcomes. So this is relative to the student. So when you're doing the reflection process, you can say, well, our students aren't meeting these certain benchmarks. Now that's a macro assessment of the program, and that makes sense. But if you're getting into specific student assessment elements, that's different than what you would say in this reflection process. So it is student-centered because it's about the student, and certainly an example of that would be our learning objectives document that we did in 2011, and we're going to talk about the update in 2014. there are a lot of things, as you could tell, that are part of this webinar, some really interesting changes, and we actually have data to share, which is a great thing. So I encourage you to share this webinar, the delivery of the webinar. Your speaker's not that great, but the data I'm giving you is really, really important. So make sure that you share this with your colleagues. So again, to wrap this important point up, I want to make sure this was on a slide, is going back to this methodology, right? Who is part of the self-assessment process? And I list all these folks, and I think everyone's aware of this. I get the sense with some of these self-assessments that, we have a call, and I talk with the faculty, and I talk with the dean or whoever's sitting at the table, and they say, oh yeah, we're doing this. We're doing this for AACSB, or we're doing this for SACS, or we're doing this for ACBSP, or we're doing this for whoever, but you're not documenting it. And so then we just make edits, and we go forward. So some of it's just a matter of, oh yeah, we are doing these things, but I just didn't put it in the packet. So make sure you have to take the time to really say, we are doing all these things, and having the right people to mention all the right things. So I'm bringing up the Capstone course because we need to do just a little bit of a tune-up regarding these requirements. And looking at the 2013 renewal, and I didn't put our numbers up there, but I would say a large majority of our programs that did not make the first cut of getting their registration renewed was actually about the Capstone course, and was a year, 2, 3 years removed from getting it approved initially, which has been a little bit of I guess a little bit of a head scratcher for me. So I want to talk about that and the two areas that are an issue here. So first of all, we have two different sets of learning objectives, right? We have the student-centered learning objectives based upon CFP Board Principal Topics. That was the resource document that we created in 2011 that we're updating this year. And then we have the learning objectives for the Capstone course, and there are 7 of those. Those learning objectives must be on the syllabus and a portion of the Capstone course, or whatever course that you have identified as meeting the CFP Board Financial Plan Development course requirement. They have to be on the syllabus. They have to be assessed for in a rubric that's specifically designed for those learning objectives. Now, learning objective 6 and learning objective 7, if you're assessing for those separately, you want to give a quiz on those, and you really don't want to have that to be an inherent part of the development and presentation of the comprehensive plan, that's perfectly fine. But there has to be an assessment rubric, and those learning objectives are the criteria for this course. So I encourage you to share this with the individual that's teaching this course for your program, and remind them that this is absolutely needs to be in there. The assessment rubric, I'm certainly encouraging that assessment rubric to be part of the syllabus, and I don't see why you wouldn't do that. Having that rubric there at the beginning of the course, and maybe it's a rubric you're not going to, I hope you're doing more than one case, but if you're only doing one, maybe it's going to be weeks before you use that rubric, but that just helps the student better understand how all these components are going to be weighted. They're seeing the different, what a 5 out of 5 means for each of these areas, or a 3 out of 5 means, and they start to have a better understanding of how they're being assessed. So I would strongly encourage institutions to go ahead and make sure that rubric's part of the syllabus. CFP.net/registered programs, I hope you're very familiar with that site, and your faculty are familiar with that site. All the information and the criteria for this course is available, and I think there are 3 webinars on that course that are available on that site. So switching gears a little bit and getting out of the talk about biennial renewals, I want to talk about a couple of new and very, very important initiatives that are coming for CFP Board Registered Programs in 2014. So the first one is the Certification Completion Initiative. And I announced this at the Registered Program Conference in 2013, and I'm going to follow up with that right now. So for each and every program, they will receive, beginning this year, actually by April 30th, a report that looks exactly like this. And this report is based upon the students that you are sending in to us as completing your program since 2012. And per program, this report will tell how many of those students have submitted, what is that average based upon program type. So if your program is a baccalaureate program, it will give an average relative to baccalaureate programs. How many of those students have had a matching CFP board account, which gets into having the ID, have ever sat for the exam, have passed the exam, and then gone on to get certified. So these are the same numbers. I think I even talked about this in the webinar last fall, but this is the actual report that you're going to get. This is obviously quantitative data. Having data that starts at the beginning of 2012 is a challenge because it's going to take a while or longer to make this data more useful, right? Because that's not a lot of time. But it's a starting point, and I'm going to talk about some other things that we can do with regard to this data going forward. This will be shared with the program contact, the program director, and with the individual that's identified as the chief academic officer of the program. So all institutions will receive this individual report. When you get to your next renewal, you will be asked, what are you planning to do to address this issue? So for example, if your numbers are really low with regard to students sitting for the exam, what is your plan for improving that? Now, in a large majority of our programs, when you submit your initial document, a lot of our programs have said that their program objectives are preparing individuals to become CFP professionals. Well, this is actually telling you how you're doing relative to that. And so that baseline is we kind of figure out what these aggregates are in baseline, and I did look at the initial numbers last week, and I think many of you are going to be very surprised when you see them. But it's not about necessarily coming up with a number that's absolutely acceptable, but it's going to be working with each institution and saying, what is your plan? And here's some suggestions. You know, we're certainly going to be there to help in that regard, but what are you thinking about doing to help? You know, going back to this idea of more students taking the exam, is it more practitioner engagement? Is it more internships? Is it bringing more CFPs onto the faculty? You know, there are a dozen different things to do relative to that to improve that number. Now, it's important that when you get further down with regard to students who have passed the exam, you know, you all have less control over that point, and certainly the certification point, than the other variables, right? And so, you know, we want to be very careful in highlighting the areas that institutions have control over and areas that we can work together on to improve that. So again, this is valid from the beginning of 2012 to present. If you would like to submit names prior to 2012, a standard form will be developed outlining how to do so. So when we announced this in August of last year, I had dozens of you approach me and say, can we go back further? We really want to know how we're doing. And the answer to that is yes. We'll work together. You're going to have to send in required information so that we can document that, and we'll put a form together and we'll put it on the Registered Programs webpage when that time comes. I wrote Be Comprehensive, and the reason why I wrote that is, you know, if you're gonna say to your administrator, you know, we're doing a great job, I'm going to send in names from 2007, and you're going to see how great we are, and then you didn't submit half of the names that have graduated from your program, then that's not going to be indicative of the great work that you're doing. So that's why I write, if you want to go back earlier than that, you're going to need to make sure you've got all the names and that you send them to us. Now, I asked this question, this is a big point, are you submitting all the names of all your program graduates? So what we ask for as essentially as a requirement is what FERPA calls directory information. So we're not going to put our partner institutions in a situation where they're violating federal law. The other possibility is that we have a form. The other option is we have a form for students to complete, and it's on our webpage that you can hand out to your students at any point. I'd have it at the beginning of the program or get them to set up an ID, and that takes care of everything. So that they give you all of that information and you know that they're sending it in. So, if you're only sending in half of the names to your graduates, then it's not going to be a very complete report. So you want to make sure that the data that you're sending to us relative to your graduates is valid and is comprehensive, so that the snapshot that you're getting back in your institutional report is indicative of the work that you're doing. I know that there's some things that institutions are going to need to clean up relative to that, because many of you have told me that. And so I think engaging students sooner in the process is certainly going to help. So the Registered Program Conference is coming. It's August 7th and 8th at the JW Marriott Hotel here in Washington, D.C. The call for proposals will go out in February, and as always, I'll be interested to see all the proposals coming in, and we expect to have we almost broke a record with attendance last year, and I expect that we probably will this year, given all of our programs and all the things that we're doing this year. This is a very big year for policy, and I think making some important changes. Early bird registration will also begin next month. So I bring this up. One of the things that we're doing a lot more is our programs engaging firms in the profession. So we have a couple of different things that I'm working on to help you all engage the profession, and a number of different ways that as we get closer to the conference, I think you're going to see a renewed focus there. Because all of that, as you all know just as well or better than I do, all of that affects recruitment, it affects student retention and completion, and certainly affects placement. And so, we see all of those components as we're focusing more on certification, completion, and retention. Certainly this notion of engaging the profession is important, and within the past 6 months, I've played a bigger role in engaging firms and working with Joe Mageri, who's our Director of Firm Relations, and coming up with some strategies that I think you all will find to be very beneficial to your program, certainly beneficial to your students and to industry and to CFP Board. So I'm real excited about that. I think you're going to see that in our conference coming up, a very different focus in that area, and certainly thinking about our programs in a very comprehensive way. So I'm very excited about that. There are a couple of really important surveys that are out, and it just kind of worked out with timing that we're kind of inundating you with surveys, but they really are important. And I want to talk about the first one here, which is the WIN online survey. This was launched in 2013 with 2 goals: identify the root causes for the underrepresentation of women CFP professionals, which has been a static 23% for a long time. And I think all of us together, I've been on so many of your campuses, and I've spoken with probably all of you, and this is something that we all share as an issue, and we're going to work together to try to improve it. And then obviously, once we identify this causes, develop a strategy for bringing more women to the profession. It's a multi-phase research project to look at these root causes, and there's an online survey, and your participation is really, really important and encouraged as you complete the survey. My understanding is that you got a link that was sent out that talks about the survey, and we'll certainly ask you to complete that, and there'll be a reminder invitation as well. So the second notion that I've already referenced is the Student-Centered Learning Objectives Validation Study. So this is to validate the Learning Objectives document from 2011, and this is a very important study. This document is going to provide clarity relative to the competency requirements that are associated with CFP certification, clarity for both faculty and students. So it is absolutely vital that each institution, each program has their say regarding that document that we started in 2011 and coming up with learning objectives that we've all had a say and that we will end up using in a predominant way going forward. And we'll talk about that, how the learning objectives are going to fit later on this year. But that you've gotten the link probably 3 or 4 times already. Your chief academic officer has gotten the link and has been asked to forward it. That is up until February 15th. So this is just it's really self-explanatory, so I don't know why I bother putting this in. But this is the first, essentially the first 12 topics, and you essentially decide yes or no whether these are topics that you can complete. And then if you can't, then you go on to the next one. And essentially it'll be you rate the importance of each one, and then if you've got edits in a box, then you put those down. It's a long survey. It is, because there's 220 learning objectives, but we created it so that you could do part of it now and then come back and do part of it later in more than one sitting. So share with your program colleagues. As I mentioned, the survey closes on the 15th of February, so we've got to get that completed. The link to the survey is there, and make sure your institution's voice is heard. Everybody needs to have a say in this. And we've made this open for a month, and once these things come down and we finish them, I really want to make sure everyone feels some ownership in each aspect of that document. I want to talk about a couple things relative to the CFP exam. So, as you may be aware, the CFP certification examination will transition to computer-based testing, CBT, beginning with the November 2014 exam. So the frequently asked questions is all of those, and there's a long list of them that are on our web page at the link that you're looking at right there. Share that with your students. Share that with faculty so that they have a good understanding of this change and everything you would possibly want to know about CBT and our transition to that beginning in 2014. We are going to do more than we have in the past with regard to making sure our programs are aware of the closest testing sites. So you're going to get more direction from us regarding that as we get closer to this launch, because that's obviously important, and accessibility is a huge part of this whole initiative. As promised, this is the second main point regarding the exam. As promised in August of last year, and so if you didn't come to last year's conference, you missed a lot. You don't want to miss it this year. But as promised, a list of names of students who sat for each exam will be provided to each institution after every exam. So if you had 6 students from your program take a specific exam, you will get a list of 6 names or 16 names or whatever it is. This is something that you all asked for. We have certainly relied upon you as an important advocate and champion of the CFP marks, and this is something you've asked for in helping you engage students who may or may not take the exam. You could probably sense that we are now getting data, and we're essentially sharing lots of data with one another. You're sharing more data with us, and we're sharing more data with you, which is really, really important in our partnership. So this will begin in July of 2014. Finally, we did a webinar recently that talks about interpreting your exam results, and that recorded webinar is available on our webpage to anyone that wants to view it at the link that you're looking at. And I encourage you to share. Again, you have lots of things I'm asking you to share. I'm going to talk about mailing lists and all that stuff in just a second, but certainly encourage you to share this with folks involved with your program, whether it's faculty or students, to learn more about the exam. We're doing a lot with regard to demystification of the exam, and I think you'll be excited about some of the things that we're doing and things that we've mentioned here today. So stay engaged. If you've got faculty that are part of the program, I encourage you to send send their email address to the email that's listed there, so they can stay engaged with what's going on and be part of these webinars and things like that. I try to do a lot with communication, particularly on the education front, because there's a lot of things going on, and having your faculty connected is really, really important. Your Career Center contacts, we're working very hard to come up with some things in the coming months that are going to supplement your work with regard to recruitment and retention. And having your Career Center contacts available to us is just going to help you in your work and the things that you're doing. So last year, we've made incredible progress, and I can't tell you how excited I am when I look at some of the programs. We've got a record number of programs right now that are doing, all of you are doing great work. We've done a terrible job when it comes to Career Center contacts. So this has been a frustrating point because so many of you are talking about recruitment and retention, and out of all of our programs, we have 27 career contacts. That's it. So send them in to registeredprograms@cfpboard.org so we can help you in engaging those folks that are meeting with students who are making decisions about a program. We should have a list of at least 150. So send them in. And then for students to create a free CFP Board ID, that's cfp.net/students, and we're certainly looking at some things as we engage your students in ways that I think is going to help you in what it is that you're doing, and certainly what is our shared objectives. Again, a recording of this webinar will be available at cfp.net/registered programs within a few weeks. I think it's going to be sooner than that, but sometimes it takes a little while to get things connected and whatnot. There's my contact information. I'm always available to talk about strategies for the programs. I try to get to visit as many programs as I can, but I do provide oversight, but I really provide guidance too, because your success is our success, and we are in this together. So I make myself very available to you all to brainstorm. Let's go ahead and take a second, and I'm going to pause here and go ahead and feel free to type in your questions. That was a lot of material, so I'm happy to answer any questions you have within the next couple of minutes. Okay, you can keep typing in questions if you've gotten them. I'm going to start going through these right now. The Financial Planning Standards, Financial Planning Practice Standards document is available as a PDF. It is on our webpage at cfp.net, and if you can't find it, email registeredprograms@cfpboard.org, and Pablo or Abby can help you out with that link. The next question is, will you provide names of those that passed or failed the exam? No, we are only providing names of the students who took the exam. We are not providing pass or fail information. So I want to be very clear about that. It is only the names of the students who sat for the exam, not pass, fail information. If you do not have your email or someone else's email on the emailing list, and if you're a program director, then we've got a bigger issue we need to address. But just email registeredprograms@cfpboard.org, and we will make sure that you're on that email list. Will you provide the slides ahead of the release of the webinar? No. And the only reason why that is because I just finished it at 10 o'clock this morning. But they're available after it. I mean, they'll be available in perpetuity. So you can go back and refer to them at any time. The Certification Completion Initiative Report will be available electronically. Now, I can tell you the first time through, we are still looking at how we're going to go about that. I'll tell you our goal is to set it up so that it's password protected and you can go online and look at it any time. I don't think we're going to get there by April 30th. So the format that you get it April 30th might be different than the format you get it down the road. but certainly electronically is certainly the route to go. And I'm really pushing if we've got the capabilities to if we have the capabilities to make it so that you can go ahead and access that at any time. Is there a PDF of the PowerPoint available? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we'll probably share the slides. That's fine. Certainly the webinar will be available, but we could post. That's a good idea, actually. We'll post the PowerPoint in the coming days on the website. So that's a great suggestion, Dr. Weegley. Who is going to win the Super Bowl? Well, you know, we don't have many programs in Seattle, but we have a lot of programs in Denver and the state of Colorado. So, you know, being a company man, I'm going to say that I'll go for Denver, since that's although we do have some partners coming in the state of Washington. But right now, I'll say Denver. Do we submit completed CFP candidates via email to a certain person? So, that process is available on our webpage, and your institution should be doing that already. So there's a process that you go through in getting a username and a password, and then there's you get into a system, and then you use a specific use Excel file to upload those names. And so I don't know why that hasn't been happening before, but nevertheless, if you have issues, email Pablo Antonio Melendez, who's our new Registered Programs Administrator. You can email him at registredprograms@cfpboard.org, and he will be happy to help you out. And then I got another question about the slides. Yeah, we're going to make those slides available, and because this is some really important information, and you definitely need to share it. So I'm happy to do that. Other than that, thank you very much. I think a lot of the changes here are changes that came about from our conversations and from our work together, and I think that I hope that it's going to benefit all of us as we go forward. I'm certainly available. I look forward to visiting many of you on your campus this year, and certainly talking with you and whatnot. So thank you very much, and I'll be the last to say Happy New Year. Thank you.